It should
All
be
right.
running now.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm so excited. So my name is Ginger Jacobson. My background and PhD is in sociology. I studied environmental sociology and race relations, and I've done some work in the way people interpret popular culture, including doing interviews with college students on Beyonce's Formation song and video, and focus groups on Lemonade, which is her visual album. And so I did this when I worked as a sociology professor and researcher, and I now work at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University in behavioral research support. I work with also pre-doctoral students, people who are trying to get into grad programs. So if you are one of those people, you could certainly hit me up. I'm totally excited to talk to young people trying to get into grad programs. Lastly, I'm a card-carrying Beehive member. I even had a podcast named Squeezing Lemons with a fellow Beyonce fan co-host. And now I have a podcast called Sippin' Tea with Dr. G. I'll be reposting the audio of our conversation there later on. So that's a shameless plug for that. Thanks for having me. Lisa, you're muted.
Dr. Rhonda Matthews, you're next.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Rhonda Matthews. I am a professor of politics at Edinburgh, but I am also a sociologist and a card-carrying member of the Beehive. Part of what I do is talk about politics, but I talk about it from a sociological perspective. And in that, part of what I do is incorporate analyses of popular culture in the same way that Dr. Jacobson does, right? About and focusing on how it is that these cultural messages are delivered and the ways in which we see these messages in pop culture and what they mean. And tonight, mostly what I'll be talking about is the concept of power.
Thank you. Dr. Wellman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlotte Wellman. I'm an associate professor of art history at Edinburgh University in the art department. I teach particularly in the areas of modern and contemporary art with a special focus on gender studies. And my special field of research is actually aging. But I think all art historians are very much engaged in kind of cross-disciplinary studies that break down boundaries between high art and popular culture. And that is a special passion of mine. It has enabled me to pursue collaborations with Dr. Matthews and other beloved colleagues. I believe I'm also the person who has been charged with sharing with you the video well, I have to say something before I say the word, don't I? That you are going to be hearing mature language this evening, particularly on behalf of our dynamic performers, and I'm not talking about the speakers on this panel. With that warning issued, give me a chance to screen share and pull up the video. After the screening, each of us will share some thoughts and engage each other and you in conversations about this experience.
We're going to let Dr. Jacobson take the screen share now.
Okay, I love them so much. It's just such a pleasure to watch it every time. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the arc of their work, Beyonce and Jay-Z, as a foundation of apeshit, and then give an overview of some of the themes that are present that we'll be talking more about today. And I'll share my screen in a moment. So I want to first say that the evolution of both Beyonce and Jay-Z's work independently has become more political, visual, and narrative over time. And so Beyonce's 2016 Lemonade visual album was very different than anything we've ever seen before and really started to push this forward. And I won't go into my findings from this research, but I will say that participants all certainly agreed that the video and song of Formation from that album includes positive messages that are lacking in mainstream discourse. And this demonstrates that popular culture and celebrity is an entry point for discussing these issues of race, gender, and other important social topics. And so the music of her Lemonade album is about romantic relationships, love and heartbreak, talking about Jay-Z cheating on her. But the visual album adds dimension with this message of lots of messages of intergenerational relationships, Black unity and mobilization, female empowerment and feminism, gender, both masculinity and femininity, self-love. And there's a lot of visual demonstration of community and women being together in solidarity, partly through the lines. So this is a big thing in dance and this form of art, where we're looking at the women standing together in a line as representing and symbolizing unity and togetherness. So this is from Formation. This is where they're all wearing Gucci in the pool. There's also shots, here's another one of sandcastles from Lemonade, the album. This is where they're kind of in a baptism, so to speak. They're going through a rebirth, and the theme of this song was forgiveness. And then we see the movement that they are in a straight line, and it's visually appealing, of course, but symbolic again, like I mentioned earlier. So then we see that again in Ape Shit. It's a through line of the solidarity with other women. They're holding hands, gyrating in celebration, but also a beautiful movement. So that's one point I'll make about Beyonce and her work. And so then Jay-Z's work has become explicitly political over time as well. And in 444, his album that came out in 2017, two of the songs, for example, The Story of OJ and Family Feud, discuss fissures within the Black community. He also, at this point, mentions how you could grow wealth by investing in art, kind of alluding to what they're doing here. And the 444 eponymous track is actually an apology for cheating and a response to the album Lemonade and what was going on there. So it's interesting how they're kind of playing off each other over time in the different work that they're doing and putting out. So the Carters album, Everything is Love, where Ape Shit comes from, it's something of a resolution to the turmoil of their relationship that plays out in Lemonade. And it's also a long way from Crazy in Love or Upgrade You. This is a more mature sound and look that they have. It's more sophisticated, reflecting the maturity of their relationship. So, so going into Ape Shit now, it's very upbeat in sound and movement. And it's a celebration of the couple as they demonstrate their equality and support of each other to build success together. And they invite the audience to celebrate their success as the video and song also recenters Blackness as art. There's beautiful movement, like I said, the dance aesthetic lines. So they're bringing movement to light and life to otherwise still art that's in the Louvre. Now, there's also the lack of movement. So there's statuesque poses as the Carters and other dancers pose as actual statues, or as they are in front of the Mona Lisa, posing as art themselves too. So it really leaves the audience to wonder the significance of their chorus, "Can't believe we made it." You know, are they talking about the couple? Are they talking about the community at large? Yeah, and the last theme that you'll notice in their arc of all of their work is romantic love. And so they really sell us on their personal love story from On the Run tour. I mean, they've been selling us on their love story for decades at this point, but this is an image from 2014. They're On the Run tour, and then again, another image from the same tour, which always ended with "This is real love" written in the back. And so they have other shots in Ape Shit as, oh, sorry, this is them in Ape Shit, of course, her king and his queen sitting there together. And then they have other shots of romantic love. I think Charlotte will probably talk a little bit about these images too. And then the last piece is love for community. And so they talk about this in a lot of their work, not just in the Carter's album here. Love of community and protest. So the art of protest and working together, mobilizing and being stronger together. And so the last point I want to make is that as a person who has studied and taught a little about critical race theory, I can't stop thinking about the connections between apeshit and critical race theory. So I noticed that apeshit, of course, is a critique on white space and whites as arbiters or gatekeepers of art and beauty. And so I'm reminded of the tenets of critical race theory, and this grows from critiques of critical legal studies of the late 1970s, of those studies being too white-centric. And so in the late 1980s, we start to see critical race theory develop. And the tenets are really that, they're identifying, these critical race scholars are identifying legal discourse as a crucial site for the production of ideology and the perpetuation of social power. They recognize the centrality of history and context in theorizing the relationship between race and legal discourse. They highlight how social interests are determined by law and how law persuades people to believe that it is just, or tries really hard, and that law has agency. So the critical race theory will examine how law has constructed race, how law continues to reproduce racial hierarchies, and recenters the perspectives of scholars of color and the experiences of people of color in the legal system. And one way it does so is that it draws on storytelling. So I find that apeshit similarly critiques art, and perhaps there's some version of critical art theory that incorporates these similar critical race theory tenets. So I noticed that apeshit highlights that art discourse is a crucial site for the production of ideology and perpetuation of social power. It recognizes the whole video and song recognizes the centrality of history and context in theorizing the relationship between race and art discourse. That apeshit highlights social interests are maybe not determined, but emphasized by art. And art has agency. It influences how we feel, what we think is normative, appropriate, and respectable, particularly in terms of beauty, gender roles, racial roles as well. And it draws on storytelling. So they're telling the story of their love and support of each other, among other things. So the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Rhonda or Charlotte is that the Carters are really reframing how we understand art by disrupting the way art perpetuates racial hierarchy. And so they recenter Black artists, bodies, and Blackness in general in the white space of the Louvre, where the art overwhelmingly features white subjects. And Beyonce and Jay-Z are featuring themselves as subjects of art. The last piece here I'll say is the reclaiming in the musical piece of art. So there's a lot of animalism weaved throughout the song, sounds of the song in the ad-libs, either from Quavo, who co-wrote the song, or Offset, who are both doing vocals in the background. And then you have actual monkey noises that you hear. Jay-Z in his lyrics is also helping to change the pejorative meaning of primates that has been used against African Americans into an empowering meaning used by African American artists. So they're purposefully going apeshit on stage and then inspiring crowds to do the same. Okay, and that's where I'll end my comments, and I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say.
Dr. Wellman?
Okay. Thanks for giving us so much to talk about, Ginger. I feel like you've laid out your main themes, like my huge ideas, but also tasty appetizers for us to partake of later. I'm taking one of the key phrases from Apeshit and using it to title my comments, and giving a particularly art historical twist to the refrain, "I can't believe we've made it," because my particular role as I see it on this panel is to really think about the art historical narratives that are deployed by this power couple and the ways in which they unmake and remake history in their own image. So I think one important way to start is to really underscore the ways in which so many Black artists predicate their reactions to the encyclopedic collections of visual art encapsulated in museums and other institutional settings by their exclusion from them, from those narratives. I could introduce this using multiple images, but I choose to introduce this idea through Carrie Mae Weems' series called Museums. She often uses her body as a means of confronting particular political realities in their intersection with Black experience. So this is her standing, her bold silhouette, isolated in space, the street utterly vacant, standing on a crosswalk that is supposed to facilitate her movement across the street, up the stairs, and into this temple of culture, when actually she realizes, along with many other African-American artists, that when she enters through those portals, she will see virtually no images of herself reflected there. I contrast that with a scene from Lemonade, where Beyonce stands in this startling, brilliant yellow dress at the doorway of this temple, which is clearly transgressed. She's violated the boundary thrown up by mainstream colonial white culture. Her arms outspread, taking up space, and this gush of water, amniotic fluid, certainly. It is the attribute of the goddess Venus rising on the half shell, really announcing a rebirth and kind of the identification and projection of new narratives that most definitely and assertively include Black subjects. So I see in Apeshit the intertwining of a number of different narrative threads. It's really a stage where we bear witness to the ways in which she and Jay-Z take their personal history, connect it to the history of race in America, and the art historical history into which they interject their own powerful experience. So in this opening screen, we see this power couple embracing, and this image of two people coming together in intimate conversation is evident in a still from Apeshit on the right-hand side. And very significant, of course, that the Leonardo da Vinci masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, looks over their shoulder, kind of juxtaposing the representation of figures in mainstream culture, and then the superimposition of intimate, personal Black history on top of that. This is a theme celebrated in Black art as well. Everything happens at the kitchen table in Carrie Mae Weems' series. Here, the artist sitting as both creator, standing behind the camera, but also sitting in front of it and engaging this very, very intimate activity with a friend or family member. There's a lot of art in apeshit, a lot. It's all culled from this vast collection at the Louvre. And I found in investigating other art historians' perceptions of it, that very, very many of the artworks chosen to be shot in apeshit include a Black character. This highlighting of the Black presence, often overlooked in the history of art, has certainly been the topic of Fred Wilson's excavations of art historical collections, and he highlights the Black figure in colonial portraits by reproducing the painting on the right, on the left, and then highlighting the Black presence. And I've done similar things here with my squares in 3 of the masterpieces included in apeshit by Theodore Géricault, Paolo Veronese, and Peter Paul Rubens. But they're ancillary to the narrative, right? They get lost in the melee, right? But the single image that foregrounds a Black person is Marie-Guillemine Benoit's portrait of Madeleine. And watching apeshit again with you, they do something very interesting and very important. They crop this painting so that the breast is not revealed. They restore to her the privacy that she deserves. I chose not to do that because there are double readings of this that interest me. This has been recovered as a portrait of a specific woman during a period of abolition, the abolition of slavery in France in the early 19th century. This portrait dates to 1800, but it's also been suggested that she is an allegorical figure. And allegorical figures are always presented as bare-breasted. Think of the figure of, should have had it in here, of the French Republic striding across the barricades, right? As an example of that. So that would be a more positive way of thinking about the violation of this woman's body, the bearing of the Black body, all too often done in the history of art and in history in general. So another way to think about apeshit is taking away the narrative that mainstream culture has assigned to art and replacing it by foregrounding Black histories. So this is the big staircase. You get to the top of the staircase, there's the Victory of Samothrace with her wings aloft. She's a Venus figure, winged. If you turn the corner and you keep going up the stairs, you're going to get to the Mona Lisa. So this is like a really big space in the Louvre. And here are these gorgeous dancers, really basically the artist's palette. Every color of Black skin imaginable. And I love this. Rhonda and Ginger told me this. There is one single white dancer in this troupe, in the Carter's Dancers. So that power dynamic is reversed here. The stairs, for me, become the ship of the Middle Passage. The Victory of Samothrace at the top is the prow of the ship. Really, Beyoncé dancing very vividly is kind of reproducing the beating wings. She's also kind of like a hood ornament, but she becomes a work of art because she's dressed in marble. That's, I think, a way of also seeing racial history intersect with high art. So this is the famous Brooks print we're all familiar with that shows slaves shackled in the ship in the Middle Passage. But here I want to show it in the work of Betty Saar, who appropriates it and grafts it onto the top of a ironing board in her work, I'll bend, but I will not break. Here the dancers lie down. It very, very much resembles the slaves lying in the ship in the Middle Passage. But then they raise their bodies up, right? Their legs, their arms, they come up and they kind of feel like waves in the ocean. But they also, to anyone as steeped in art history as me, I'm looking at it going, there's Aristide Maillol. There it is. It's his heir, another allegorical figure, which Beyoncé very much casts herself as an apeshit. And also I look at the statue by Aristide Maillol and I think bronze, well, it looks like Black skin suddenly. I can't help but compare the Benoit Madeleine to images of Beyonce draped in Versace fabric, but transforming the headscarf so commonly associated with the enslaved woman. It now becomes the nemes, which is the crown of the pharaoh. She turns the slave into a goddess. She turns the slave into a queen. And they're enthroned here, quite clearly. I love this masterwork by Jacques-Louis David of the coronation of Napoleon. And then he turns and crowns his own empress, which was a great shock to the priests who were meant to do this ritual themselves. Huge tableau, enormous. You know, one of the masterpieces of Western art history. She uses it as a backdrop for her own narrative. And she activates the narrative and the capacity to change it by moving in front of it with her dancers. A lot of artists have engaged in this kind of cultural appropriation and transforming it, bending it to their own objectives. So Kehinde Wiley, somebody that the Carters collect, and here's his portrait of Ice-T, enthroned as a king. I see interesting power dynamics in this couple as we layer the personal, the racial, and the more generally art historical. Beyonce often becomes a work of art. Jay-Z becomes the collector looking at this marvelous object, right? So I've highlighted that in the David on the left. So other ways that we can think about art as a presence in apeshit. Ginger, you've mentioned that they step forward here as portraits, looking for all the world like Grant Wood's American Gothic, racialized. But now the triangulation happens not with a Gothic revival house in the background, but with probably one of the most famous portraits in the world. And the bulletproof molding that's been built around the Mona Lisa that makes it really difficult to see now, actually, frames them in this still shot. So when they stop in apeshit, they become works of art. When they move, they're making the narrative. Voguing, I think an important, I see it a bit in apeshit moments where, you know, they frame their faces in what is a really, it comes out of the Black dance community, that move. At the conclusion of the video, they turn and they face the work. That's different because then you're not a portrait, you're a collector, and this is your collection. So Beyonce, to me, she's an artist. She is also a maker of art history, of her own history. Here she sits at the piano making music. But notice that the Basquiat picture, which they have just purchased, and she's announcing that in her Instagram here, frames her, making her a work of art. And then flanking that on the other side, on the left, she stands immaculately, this gorgeous kind of contrapposto goddess. And Jay-Z's looking at her as if she too is a work of art. Notice the gloves cut her arms off here. Well, that's because she's the Venus de Milo. And the color of her tunic that calls attention to her as a nude matches her skin. One of my students pointed out to me, it's not just the Band-Aids, Dr. Wellman, that don't match our skin. Our point shoes in ballet don't either. You know, she was talking about, my student Isaiah was talking about how in the press, you know, they're starting to really multiply all of the ways in which Black women can't go out and find products that match their skin colors. Not only can they not believe they've made it, but Have you ever seen a crowd go in ape shit? Really emphasizes the importance of spectacle. Not only are the Carters rendering their own narrative visible, but they're also empowering the crowds that watch them to become visible and empowered as well. So here she is, making a spectacle of herself, literally at the top of these stairs, becoming a work of art, but also performing her own narrative. So we can look back at this also as calling attention to them as art patrons. They're looking at us and we're looking back at them. And that reciprocity confirms their agency and their power of self-determination. So this technique, this device of exchanging glances is very much picked up in the history of art and works like this by Velázquez. This is his Las Meninas Spanish Baroque work. Oops, pardon me. I hopped over that a little fast. Their own collection, I think, very much amplifies that. It took me some time to actually see this. This is a work by Carrie James Marshall, who's actually generated the term mastery to talk about the articulation of a Black subject and a Black history by appropriating works of art and interjecting foregrounding Black experience. If you look at the glass wall at the back of this space, can you see that he has bent down to take a picture of this woman posing for him? You see the flash of his light bulb going off. So he's calling attention to the fact that, hey, I'm out here. I made this. This is my statement. This is my history. Oops, I'm going the wrong way now. I conclude by touching upon the sense that the constructing that narrative is also very much predicated on self-fashioning. And to fashion yourself is to make yourself the way one would make a sculpture or a work of art, but it's also a play on the notion of fashion, which is absolutely central to defining their image. Here, Beyonce and Jay-Z are standing in front of the greatest sphinx outside of Egypt. It's the Great Sphinx of Tanis, and they're standing in front of it, almost like sculptures themselves. She's wearing a material that feels like clay, or that feels like a material that an artist would use. This is my last image, having to do with self-fashioning, where I draw together this kind of complexity of the racialized body, this incredible image of the dancers on the stairs leading up to the victory of Samothrace, and all of their glorious colors, the artist's palette, taking that into popular culture and into the world, offering a constellation of skin colors. And then at the bottom, this is a work by Byron Kim that's predicated on every person who crosses the threshold of his studio. He holds up his palette and he matches the colors of his paints to the colors of their skin. And so this becomes a painting of the community of people that come together to inspire his work. Thanks.
Dr. Matthews.
My turn.
Yes.
All right. So I don't have a PowerPoint. I don't have images. I just have 4 themes that I would like to talk about. So I first want to talk about gender, right? The notions of gender as expressed in our culture, and then the ways in which the two of them bend these. So if we want to talk about gender and patriarchal notions, we have to first start off with the ways in which the two of them interacted with each other early in their relationships in the relationship, which Dr. Jacobson alluded to a little bit earlier. So at the beginning of their relationships, what we saw in terms of the power dynamic was that Beyonce was the subordinate one, right? She was the quote unquote woman, and Jay-Z was the dominant one, the quote unquote man. And what we see in Ape Shit is a culmination. Well, not a culmination, that's probably the wrong word. I think it's the outcome of what we heard they went through that helped to construct Lemonade and then 444. Because what we now see in Ape Shit is a shifting of those patriarchal notions away from Beyonce being the subordinate and Jay-Z being the dominant. In fact, we see, I think we actually see more of a little bit more of a power imbalance tipped towards Beyonce. When Barack Obama was in office, one of the things that he said several times, in public spaces, was that, Jay-Z is a lot like me. Everybody likes his wife more than they like me. And I think that we see that expressed in Ape Shit, because they've kind of gone through the fire with their relationship, and now that what we have come out on the other side with is a partnership. Not only is it a partnership, one of the things that Ape Shit does is it very purposefully makes sure that we understand that Jay-Z is supporting her. My favorite part of the song is when they're standing in front of the Mona Lisa, and and she's singing or rapping, and all he's doing in the background is making a noise, it's just a little emphasis, just a little emphasis, and I really love that, because I think that is kind of the vocal demonstration that, yep, she's a badass and I'm here to support her. Whatever she wants to do, I'm here for it. And so we get this shift in patriarchal notions, which I think right now is really important to talk about, because one of the things that's happened, one of the discussions that's happening, unfortunately, in Black communities is this discussion about Black women and this kind of return, quote unquote, return to femininity in order to get a man, and this reemergence of what is essentially hate speech by Black men about Black women, and so what we see in this video is very much a refutation of that. So the next thing I want to talk about is politics. So a lot of the work that the two of them do now is just political, right? It is overtly political. They're not trying to hide it anymore. And I think a lot of that, I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have enough money now to say, fuck it, we're going to say what we need to say, who gonna check me? And we see that demonstrated in the video in a couple of ways. The first one is the really obvious, kneeling for Black lives, right? It's a callback to a call out to what Colin Kaepernick was doing and the entire discussion about Black lives. We saw that in Lemonade, specifically in Formation, right? In the video Formation. So unapologetically Black and talking about Black things. So that's the most obvious one. But the one that I don't hear people talking about a whole lot is the defense of Black lives, right? The call out to protection and maybe even war to do that. So the scene in which all of the young men are pointing up towards the sky, which is not just about it's not just about war. It's about elevation and looking to the sky and looking to the future. But the very next scene is I don't know which painting it is, but it is a close-up of soldiers, of the spears of soldiers, right? So what we want to do is be hopeful and look towards the sky. But if you don't stop killing us, then there's a point to which at which we're going to need to resort to another type of political warfare, and that is, quite possibly physical. And it's a quick image, but it's there. And I think the fact that it's there is the thing that is most powerful about it. So then the next theme of this clearly is race, right? This is all about race. It's all about race in terms of the ways in which we form our relationships, the ways in which the nation has treated us, the ways in which our communities are developed or not developed. And what I think is important about this concept and about the ways in which they present it is that when they're talking about Blackness, what they're doing in Apeshit is telling us how it is that Blackness works, what it is that we are supposed to do in order to have, to be Black in this country and be successful at being Black. So they talk about the power of Blackness, or the power of Black people coming from love, from families, from relationships, and from solidarity within communities, right? That's we're not just seeing that in terms of the lyrics, we're also seeing it in terms of the images that are presented, right? This is very much about power, but in these discussions, all of these images of relationships between Black men and women, relationships between Black women, the kitchen table, right? The dancing together. I'm calling back now to what Dr. Wellman and Dr. Jacobson have already talked about, right? The women in solidarity, holding hands with one another. The woman taking care of the man's hair, which is a staple in Black communities, because it's not just women taking care of the men's hair, it's people getting their hair taken care of at the kitchen table. Very intimate, right? But very much a part of Black culture and the connections that we make, right? The kinds of relationships that we have. And so what they are saying vis-a-vis Black folks is these are the ways that we as Black people become stronger. And then the last major theme that I want to talk about is capital, as in economic capital. Okay, so I am of two minds about what I'm about to say. They focus a lot on money and gaining money, right? Secure the bag, right? Get that money. And they focus on it as a way to attain institutional power. And I'm torn about that, because I don't want it to be true, but I also know it's true, right? In the United States, the way to safety and freedom for many oppressed people often lies in access to capital, right? If you have enough money, then you can basically do what they did, which is to say, we're going to say whatever the fuck we want. Who gonna check me, right? And so I'm torn about that, and I need to think it out a little bit more. But one of the things that I would say to people when we were talking about when Lemonade first came out, and we were all excited about it and analyzing, et cetera, and talking about so many different things, especially in terms of the dynamics of heterosexual relationships in the Black community, et cetera. The fact of the matter is that they had the luxury of being able to work to stay together, right? They had all the resources at their command because they have the resources to have access to those things, to counseling, to, being able to just pick up and leave and go to, take your kid and go to somewhere else safe, right? When regular old everyday people don't often have access to those kinds of resources. And so a lot of the discussion, which was kind of in a joking way, but I think was actually, a well-placed point, was that, if you're rich and your man cheats on you, you can pack up your shit and move within an hour, right? But if you're just regular old everyday working class, you can't just pick up and leave whenever you feel like it, because you don't have access. And so these discussions about capital as a path to power are very real in not just ape shit, but I think in all of their music, there is a discussion about this. 444, it's the same thing. In fact, 444 is probably much more of a capitalistic tone than is Lemonade or just this video, Ape Shit. So, money as a way to access power is as old as the United States, right? So, but I think it's important to discuss. Now, the last thing I want to say about all of this is that these are all discussions of power. When we are talking about issues of gender, we are talking about issues of power, and the ways in which they have taken the dynamics of gender in ape shit and tilted them away from patriarchal notion, mostly away from patriarchal notions, I think is important, right? So people, when they're watching this video, see this power shift, one that is very different than the lives that most people live. When we talk about power, we have to talk about politics, right? The fact that the fact that Black Lives Matter and Colin Kaepernick kneeling, or anybody speaking up for Black lives, is some point of controversy is kind of ridiculous, right? But the fact that these two international stars can put it in our faces and say, no, it's not controversial, and we have enough money to say to you that it's not, and to demonstrate why it's not. So that element of political power, I think, is important. The power that comes with open discussions about race, and the fact that these people had the capital, again, power, right? In this instance, the capital to put all of these Black images in mainstream and still have us talking about them years later. So I think when we're talking about them, we have to start with the concept of power, and then we have to examine how in every characteristic and facet of social life, they are either flipping power structures on their head, or they're reinventing them altogether. Nope, that's not the way we're going to do this anymore. Here's how we're going to do it now. And so they're presenting it to us in these beautiful packages, but they're still presenting it to us, right? They're giving us cultural messaging in ways that we will not reject, right? And in fact, in ways that we will seek out. And so I think that's the power of Ape Shit and what Beyonce and Jay-Z are doing, right? So I'm going to stop right there so we can move on.
So I'm going to ask all the panelists if just to go ahead and unmute yourselves, because right now I'm expecting a real dialogue to go on between you. And I wanted to just point out that we're 5 minutes to the end of our official time, which would be at 7 o'clock. And I know we're going to reach past that until about 7:15. I know there are people that have a hard stop at 7. You can watch the recording later, but we're going to continue on a little bit here. I just wanted to start out by thanking all of you for educating me on this music video, but I was especially sort of astonished, Dr. Wellman, from the art historical perspective, to see that relationship that you identified in that grand staircase and then the middle passage. And that was just shocking to me. And to to then rethink the entire music video as this, really thinking about the strategy of choosing the location that they did, the Louvre, and as you mentioned, Dr. Matthews, the whole idea of capital and the idea of, I mean, who has the power to take that space on? And so I open it up for conversation at this point. Does anybody respond to any of those things or any of the things that you've already shared with each other?
Well, the first thing I will say this, because I have said this to Dr. Wellman, and I've said it to Dr. Jacobson, when we've talked about this, years ago. But I when I first saw the video, I was actually sitting, I think she just drops videos, right? And I just happened to be sitting at my computer, and I don't even know how I got a notification, but so I went to it immediately and started watching it. And I was at home by myself, and this was my exact response, right? Out loud to no one in particular. I said, "Bitch, they in the Louvre," right? That was they are in the Louvre. These people have taken over the Louvre, right? Like, I've never been, but our daughter has been, right? And when they went, they were telling me about, oh my God, there were thousands of people, and I didn't really even get a good look at the Mona Lisa, and blah, 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 blah. They cleared it out to do this. That just that alone is still kind of a gobsmack to me.
Mm-hmm. And actually, that pulls me back into the comment that you made, Dr. Jacobson, the theme of "can't believe we made it," and the layers in which that phrase can be interpreted.
Yeah, when I first saw this, I had a lot of conversations about it too. And of course, I just love everything they do. It makes me so emotional. And I loved it. And one of my friends was like, aren't they just throwing around their money? Isn't it just like throwing around money? It's a moment in time. No one's going to pay attention to this next month. And I disagree wildly. But I think that it leaves a cultural impact because you can refer back to it, because now this exists in the world. It's not like 50 years ago where you would make a song and then that was it. Like, this has a visual, it's going to stay on the internet, it's going to always exist. And it has all this cultural relevance with the racial history and everything that y'all were talking about too. But I do think, I wonder if there is anything coming next, I wonder. So there's a lot of ownership and recreating what they own. So Tidal, okay, we're not going to make any money off of Spotify, whatever, so we're going to create our own platform. Even our own record company would precede that, or our own fashion line, like, all of these things that they've been doing in business. So then I was like, after this came out, I go, do you think they're going to create their own museum? Are they going to uplift Black artists and create their own museum and do something like that? It doesn't seem to be that that's what's happening, but I wonder, how else can you exist within a capitalistic system but still subvert it? Yeah.
I think that's a good question. I do. And I don't know what the answer is. I do know this. I know that at least Beyonce, and so probably Jay-Z, they are archiving their own legacies. I do know that. She has an archivist. She has an archivist. So I think that you might not be far off, in your predictions about that. I just don't know if it's going to be for them, but they're collecting art. They've got their kids, kind of involved in this process too. So I don't know. And they're really secretive. So perhaps what they're doing is funding other organizations to do this work. But yeah, I think it's a good question. I do.
Dr. Jacobson, you talked about critical race theory as relating to this, and you talked. I think there was another act or series of words that you used. I can't remember what it was exactly, but the could you elaborate a little bit more on how you see this film or this music video addressing that challenge that we're it's so that term that we hear so often in the media now, and it's being outlawed and so on in many communities.
Yeah, and I think so. Critical race theory is like I said, it comes from legal studies, and so the way you hear it now in discourse and mainstream, news and things, is no longer referring to actual critical race theory. It's just talking about anything that makes white people uncomfortable, basically. And I think the connection I see, though, is that critical race theory is looking at an institution that has a lot of power, which is law, legal studies, and really critiquing how it influences or has agency over people of color, and how it's been studied from a very white-centric perspective. So I see Apeshit doing a similar thing where they're critiquing this large institution of art. And art, I don't know how much it's been discussed in certainly hip hop or trap, like this falls under like the genre of trap, or like popular culture, popular music, to this extent, where it's like explicitly criticizing this institution of art and reframing and recentering who has agency. I mean, they're upstaging all of the dancers, actors, and Jay-Z, Beyonce, totally upstaging. Like Dr. Rowan was saying earlier, like the Mona Lisa's in the background of them doing hair, right? So I think there's a lot of parallels between how critical race theory originally started and what they're doing here, is like critiquing a massive institution.
Yeah.
What's interesting too is the response of the institution to this video. Could anybody weigh in on that?
Well, they've created an entire tour that's predicated on the Apeshit video, basically encouraging visitors to come in and to tour the museum, taking the same pathways and visiting the works that inspire that video. I would be a bit surprised if that isn't what boosted their stats in the past several years. So it becomes a profit-making venture for this huge, powerful cultural institution, which of course used to be a royal palace, used to be the seat for the French Académie, the major training ground for artists like Jacques-Louis David. He worked from the Louvre and, had a ton of different apprentices, basically internalize his values at his knee and then go forth and really reproduce him. So it's interesting, they could have done the Met. They could have done another institution. They chose this one. And it's a powerful choice, I think.
Well, I'm going to just thank everybody for coming tonight. I know that I missed recording the beginning of this, so I'm going to say thanks again to Erie Arts and Culture for helping to fund the Bruce Gallery, also to the Edinburgh University Art Department and the Student Government Association. I encourage you to check out the website, brucegallery.info, and also our YouTube channel will be, the recording of this will be available there by the weekend. Again, that's Bruce Gallery YouTube channel. But I want to put you a chance here for Dr. Jacobson, because I know you're also going to be downloading it as well. Would you repeat the information about where they can find it?
Yep, I'm gonna put it on my podcast. It's called Sip and Tea with Dr. G. And there's also a recent episode of me talking about critical race theory with
good.
someone else who studied it with me. So
Yeah, yeah. And Rhonda Matthews will be compiling a research guide
mhm.
that will be out in the near future that will also be uploaded to the Bruce Gallery website, and the panelists contributed to that.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and we're going to say farewell. So one last wave, and good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.